In this video we're going to tackle installing the clutch master and slave cylinders. Okay, so just to run you by some of the parts, the master cylinder, it looks very similar to the brake master cylinder, but apparently internally there's a few differences. There's like a non-return valve. I don't know the technical details, but that they look similar, but they're not interchangeable. So this one is for the clutch. The other pieces, you need this pipe that screws into the top, and this meets at the junction. I'll just show you in the diagram. Sort of that's sort of how it needs to be set up, just there. So that hose screws into the slave cylinder. The copper washer goes onto that piece, then that gets put into the slave. This is the part that gets screwed to near where the engine support bracket is, so then that goes on first and then that gets screwed down. I'll have a plate because I'm not sure which side of the plate that's meant to sit on, but anyway, once that's screwed to the engine support bracket, that piece here, that'll just screw straight into the top of here. So that doesn't need a seal because the way it works, it's like a similar plumbing sort of fitting. It compresses that part there onto the inside of there, and then that seals it up. Alright, so I think I'll get started now. So the first thing I'm doing is removing the steering column. That'll just give me a bit more room because I need to actually take out the pedal assembly. So that's the steering column removed. It actually needs to be painted anyway. So the next thing, I'm taking out the accelerator pedal. There's a couple of bolts in there that hold that on. I'd like to keep everything in the the plastic snap lock bags, so all the parts come in. I reuse those. Alright, so the reason why I need to take them pedals out is because I need to fit that piece of carpet up in the top, and it's easier to get that in now with the pedals removed, since I need to remove them anyway. Okay, and the other thing I need to do is remove the brake master cylinder. The experts will actually notice that something isn't quite right with that, but we'll get back to that shortly. Okay, so now I'm just continuing to remove out the pedal assembly. It takes a little bit of fiddling around. You don't actually have to unbolt the individual pedals. I found it easier just to unhook and disconnect the springs that are holding the actual pedals in, and then you wiggle it about and then it comes out easier. So this carpet kit that I've got doesn't actually have the holes all cut in. So the first holes I need to cut are for the heater unit, and the way I did that, I just made two long slits for it to slide in, and then that worked out nicely. One of them's slightly off-centered, but no one's going to know. Alright, the next thing I need to do is just cut out the panel completely where the brake pedals go into. So you can't just leave the carpet behind, you need to cut that whole section out so the pedals can actually fit through that hole and make their way, and then screw them up into the engine bay. You'll notice I put a couple of cushions inside the car, it just makes it a bit easier laying on that floor. So I'm just doing another test fit again, making sure everything lines up. I haven't actually glued that piece of carpet in, I've sort of just left it sitting there, and it holds itself in there. The heater brackets help it stay there, and I'm not going to glue it in just yet because eventually I'll try and get another heater unit and I'll need to sort out the pipes for that as well when that gets sorted. So the next thing I'm doing now is just working out, I need to sort of just cut a little bit out for where the actual bolts for the pedal assembly get attached to the firewall, because it's you can't just bolt it through the carpet. Well, you could, but it'll be a struggle to actually get the pedal units to fit back in there. So I'm just doing another test fit now, making sure the holes I cut are okay. And it seems like, yeah, I'm getting it in now, so that's nice and tight. The next thing I need to do is fix up those springs, hook them back on. And a lot of people struggle with the cletus pins that actually hold those the master cylinders down onto the pedal, but I didn't really seem to have that much issue at all. I've watched a few videos and then people seem to just struggle for a while trying to get them in, but I didn't have any issue at all. Okay, so back in the engine bay now, and these are a couple of gaskets which I bought. So you're meant to actually have gaskets, and that's just in case there's any leaks in those master cylinders, just in case. It just prevents it from going into the cabin. So I'm putting the brake master cylinder back in. The experts already would have noticed that that's not the correct position, because you need to be able to fit the clutch boost, the clutch master cylinder and the brake master cylinder side by side. But how I've got it bolted now, I'm not going to fit the clutch master cylinder in there. So you will see shortly me taking that out again. Okay, so back inside the car, and this is me just fitting that cletus pin. It's pretty straightforward. You just line up the pedal and put the pin through there. And the way I've done it, it's so the pins are both in between the brake and clutch pedal. There seems to be more room there, so if you ever want to take it out, the space that it needs more room is where the actual pin that holds it in. So the cletus pin just slides through. You have to move the pedal up and down just to get the right spot. And then eventually, yep, it slides in nicely. And then you just put the retaining pin in the hole to keep it in there. You can use a pair of needle nose pliers if you need help holding it. I was struggling with the torch here a bit to try and see what I was doing. So the clip sort of just slides straight in there. Don't use a split pin, because maybe that's why people struggle so much, but those pins sort of just slide straight in there. Okay, back in the engine bay again, and this is where I go to attempt, I think, to fit the clutch master. So I'm just screwing down the brake master cylinder again. I could edit this and take out my mistakes, but I thought I'd just leave it in. So as a general rule, you should always like test fit things before you screw everything down, but I just assumed that was in the correct position, because that's when I bought the car. It was a rolling shell and it had the brakes functioning, and so I just assumed that must have been the right way, but that's not the case at all. It could also be just the brand of clutch master cylinder that I bought. Just, I don't know, maybe there's differences between the brands, but I'm not too sure. That brake master needs to be changed anyway at some point. I also need to fit in the brake booster, but I've got to do a bit of research. I've looked up on the internet. The VH44 seems to be the correct unit, and there are a lot of cheaper ones available for sale, but I don't know whether they, even though it's VH44, you'd assume it's the same product, but there might be variations in the power outputs. So I need to do a bit of research before I buy the brake booster. At the moment, that's the brake master is just connected directly to the lines. I've got, as standard Cooper S, it's got disc brakes on the front wheels, but drums on the back, a single brake line. Okay, so here's where I'll try and fit the clutch master cylinder, and obviously it doesn't fit. Try it the other way, still doesn't fit. And it takes me a few moments to realise that the brake cylinder is in the wrong spot. Lucky I didn't get out the angle grinder and the hammer. Okay, so for high speed at this bit here, just undoing that. I needed to loosen up the retaining nut at the top, and it's most likely I would have let some air into the system when I undid that. So I would be planning on redoing all the brakes, re-bleeding them, and I may even change that master cylinder too, because it is pretty old. But I'll sort out all that when we're at the time putting the brake booster in, and then bleed all the wheels. Okay, so that's the brake master put in the correct spot now. Cletus pin was just put back in, and now you can see the clutch master cylinder fits nicely side by side. Okay, so I'm now just fitting the Cletus pin for the clutch, and this time I actually use a pair of long nose pliers to help get that pin in. Okay, so just fitting a couple of brand new bolts for that. Okay, so the next step I need to fit the hoses, and I realised shortly that you need to connect that hose to the slave cylinder first before you screw it in there, because the issue is that the cable which connects to the slave cylinder doesn't rotate, so you need to get that cable onto the slave cylinder first, then screw it into the firewall. Okay, so you can see now that I've got the slave attached to the cable, so that's all nicely tightened up. I lost a bit of footage there, obviously, I didn't press record. So remember to put the copper washer on when you put that cable to the slave cylinder. Now that one's tightened up. All that's left now is to put this top piece in, and then I didn't really need to bend it. It was pretty much in the right shape already. It just needed a slight adjustment just so both of those fittings fitted in nicely, and then they're all tightened down. Okay, so this is the kit I've got to bleed brakes, and it works obviously for the clutch as well, and all it does is it collects the fluid. I'll just make the point of mentioning that putting the clutch slave cylinder in and filling up the clutch with fluid is really a two-person job. I was able to do it on my own, and you'll see shortly, because I don't have the windscreen in the car. So if you can put off putting your windscreen in until the last minute, that's another handy tip. So this bottle sort of just fits on the bleeder, and all it does is just collects the fluid. that's how I'm using it for the clutch, but you know, using it as a on the brakes, there's a few different attachments for that. There's a nice little magnet on there, and you'll see shortly how that just sticks into the engine bay. So now I'm attaching the bleeder kit, filling up the master cylinder with some brake fluid. So it's brake and clutch fluid, and it's .4. That's the specification I'm using. So you'll see now what I'm actually doing is pumping the brake pedal, and nothing's actually happening yet. And the reason, what you actually need to do, you need to press down on the brake pedal. The actual the bleeder valve, you need to close that up each time you let go of the brake pedal, the clutch pedal, and you'll see shortly in a minute I've sort of figured that out, and then it starts pumping the fluid through. So there we go. So now you open and close it each time when you press the clutch pedal. That way the fluid pumps through. And you'll notice that there's a lot of air in there, so I'm trying to get as much out as possible. But once it's settled for a bit, I'll bleed it again once the engine's in and actually that gets connected up. So then you tighten up that bleeder valve. There's a little cap that came with it, so I stuck that on there. Alright, so we're at the end now, so I'm just sort of showing you how it all fits together. So that will sort of sit there on the engine. The cylinder inside that is fully extended, so you can sort of see a bit of it in the top there. So when that gets installed, you'll need to open the bleeder valve to be able to push that cylinder in. The other thing I installed was this the hose for the fuel line. And those braided hoses are very difficult to actually get on. I struggled a bit with that one. Alright, so I think I'll leave it there, and thanks for watching my videos.